But Al-Hannan has a sense of tenderness within that love, and gentleness and tenderness within that love. We said there's 99 attributes, and more than that. But in Aqeedah, we're now going to reduce them down. We're going to reduce them down to essential attributes. And these attributes, we say, what we're looking at, what we're covering here now, are those things that we believe to be wajib lillahi ta'ala. Wajib lillahi ta'ala. All of these attributes say are wajib lillahi ta'ala. These are necessary for God Almighty. And we'll look at why we say they're necessary for God Almighty. And if a Muslim rejects any of these attributes that we're going to go through, we say it's kufr billah. And in truth, when you look at it, no Muslim rejects it, although they may not be able to categorize it the way that we're going to categorize it. But no Muslim rejects these attributes. But when we have 99 names, we say in Aqeedah, we reduce it down to core attributes of God, which are 3 types. The first one is called the Sifa Nafsiyya. Sifa Nafsiyya, which we will call the personal attributes or the self-attributes, personal attributes of God. Then we have the second category, Sifat As-Salbiyya, Sifat Nafsiyya, As-Sifat As-Salbiyya, which is the negating attributes. And the third one is as-sifat or sifat al-ma'ani. Sifat al-ma'ani. Sifat al-ma'ani, which are the existing attributes. These 3 categories, and within them we're going to look at, there's 1 personal attribute, there's 5 negating attributes, there's 7 existing attributes. Sum total 13 attributes, which we say are fundamental to God Almighty in terms of defining divinity. So these are fundamental. All of these we can trace back to Quran and Sunnah, which we'll do. But likewise, most of them we can rationally prove, which we'll do as well. We'll look at rational proofs as well as scriptural proofs. We say anybody who claims divinity for anything, they must fulfill these categories, because these are essential to God. These qualities are essential to God. Without these, you would not have a God. So we need to look at these. The first one, Sifa and Nafsiyya. Sifa and Nafsiyya. Somebody can ask a question, probably won't, but I'm going to ask it anyway, which is, where do you get this categorization from? Have you just made this up? Question. Some people will object to categorizations. Say, categorize it any way you want. The important point is the attributes that underlie it. And some people say there's no dalil for categorizing in this way. See, a lot of categories that use in many sciences, there's no dalil for it. It's the ijtihad of ulama who've come and put it in a manner that makes it understandable to you. Understandable to you. So we say this is from the deduction of the ulama who've looked at Quran and Sunnah. They've extracted from there what qualities are essential for God. And they've come to this conclusion. And then they've looked at each one individually and they brought them together in different subcategories. So what's the dalil for it? Ijtihad al-ulama who looked at Quran and Sunnah, they extracted out of Quran and Sunnah. Like somebody can say, if you looked at Quran and Sunnah, the Salaf and the Sunnah, they didn't categorize them that way. So there's a lot of things in your religion that they didn't categorize. When you study fiqh, you don't see none of those categories in the time of the Salaf. When you study hadith, you call it sahih, mawdu, and say that. None of that's there in the time of the Salaf. None of that's there in the time of the Salaf. Sahaba weren't talking about mawdu hadith. You say it wasn't there in their time. Likewise, because fabricated hadith weren't there in the time. Likewise, in their times, there was no need for this discussion because belief within was innate within them. Sound belief was innate. They were pure people, lived in a pure environment that were not affected by foreign influences that corrupted minds. They didn't need any of this categorization. These categorizations came when believers became corrupted by foreign influences that changed ideas and changed minds. So the ulama had to sit down and categorize it to make it more understandable. So when somebody comes to say, this categorization has no basis in the Quran and Sunnah, say most categorizations that you use do not have that basis. But it's from the ijtihad of ulama. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, the Prophet said, Al-ulama warathatul anbiya, that the scholars are the inheritors of the prophets. So what they set down for us, and this ummah has accepted as being sound, we accept it as being sound. We accept it as being sound. The first, as-sifa an-nafsiyya. Al-wujud. Existence of God. Existence. The first quality. You want to talk about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's attributes of mercy and forgiving, so we say all of those are not, these are not the essential attributes of God. The most essential attributes of anything is that it exists. It cannot be a God if He does not exist. You cannot have a God who does not exist. If God comes into being, at the beginning point He comes into being, we say there was a time then He wasn't a God, didn't exist, can't be God. And we're going to look at rationally, now we need to prove the most important discussion in Aqida, not like the nature of the Prophet and this, all that kind of stuff. None of that's fundamental. The most important issue that you've got in Aqida, prove that God exists. Prove that God exists. That's the fundamental, and that underlies everything in your belief. Prove that God exists. So how do you prove He exists? Anybody? How do you prove that God exists? Ghulam, you got a sheikh from Damascus at the back. He's just come from Damascus, Sayyidina Ghulam. He's going to tell us. Go on. Anybody, how do you prove that God exists? You're all believers, you all know the reason. It says in the Quran. But that kafir doesn't believe in your Quran. For you, okay, as-Sadiq al-Masloop told you, the Prophet told you that God exists. Or your mum told you that God exists. People that you believe in. But the unbeliever doesn't believe in that. He doesn't believe in your sources. So that's now why we say you've got to go a level beyond that. You've got to rationally be able to prove why God exists. In the Muslim circles, it's enough to say that the Messenger said it. Non-Muslim circles, not enough. And you're surrounded by non-Muslims, so it becomes important rationally. How do you prove that God exists?
You can ask for the trees and the mountains and the lake. What?
Okay, creation itself, very important proof. It's a very important proof, and that's probably the strongest proof that's used in the Quran. Creation. If you look throughout the Quran, and we said last week, how many ayahs are there in the Quran? See if you're on the board. How many ayahs? No 6666 this week. The number of the beast coming out again. How many ayahs are there in the Quran? 6,200 odd ayahs in the Quran. It said over a third of that talks about belief. Over 2,000 verses in the Quran talks about belief. Only about 500 verses speak about law. 1/3 of the Quran speaks about belief. If you look, a lot of that is just calling you to reflect over creation. It says look into yourself, look into the horizons, talks about the bee, talks about mosquito, talks about all kinds of things, talks about camel, mountains and so on. All of that's to reflect over the perfection of God's creation. There's a call within the Quran to reflect over creation, to understand the Creator. So that's one of the most important proofs of the existence of God. Anything else? So we look at certain arguments that are used. God, first of all, God exists and is necessarily existent.